This is Caffeine for the Soul. I'm the co-pastor of Living Water Vineyard Church in Alpharetta. Thanks for tuning in. So today's title is Picking Up Pennies on the Pavement. And I think I've talked before about the concept of continually being in prayer, not this stopping, starting type situation. And so what's interesting, I talk to a lot of people, and outreaches are awesome. But once again, that's kind of this concept where you start and then you stop. And so you show up to an outreach and say, okay, I'm going to listen to the Lord, and I'm going to do these things for the Lord. But then you stop and you go home. And there's different outreaches that are kind of fine-tuned towards specific things. But what I wanted to talk about is picking up those pennies on the pavement are situations in your life that could happen every day. Different things that we might walk by that we miss. And so a couple things that keep us from missing those pennies is being labeled a cheap person. The pennies aren't worth a lot. They don't help my economic situation. The pennies are too dirty because they've been on the ground. I might get hit by a car when I'm picking up the penny if it's in the middle of the road. And then I'm in a hurry to make real money at my job, and the penny is just pointless. And so those pennies in our life are situations that God kind of opens up for us to love on people and speak hope and compassion into people's lives. So we can just go through life and miss those. We can be in a hurry to get somewhere. We can be too busy. We might have challenges with the people that God is calling us to kind of give hope or kind of give a pick-me-up to. And so all those things are things that we have to overcome. So I wanted to read a quote by H. Jackson Brown Jr. Nothing is more expensive than a missed opportunity. And so I think we have these opportunities throughout the day. And the longer we're a Christian and the longer we kind of get in this mode of survival, going from point A to point B and kind of missing those pennies, the more we kind of become numb to it. And to me, I love how the disciples and Jesus did it. So many times they did healings, they did deliverances on the way to places. It wasn't like they were telling people, hey, come to us to do this. A lot of people came to Jesus while he was teaching, but the reality is what he was doing a lot of times was from point A to point B. And it was about doing things, connecting to his Father, seeing what his Father was doing. Like I've kind of mentioned before, there were a lot of people that needed healing. Why were there a select few that we hear about that got healed? And I think he was listening to the Father and kind of seeing the long-term reality of these healings and what would happen as far as a revival and game changer in that area. So, those missed opportunities. And so Jesus talked about those missed opportunities in the parable of the Good Samaritan, which I'll read in a little bit. But before I read, I kind of wanted to give kind of some background of some potential missed opportunities that could have happened to me. So when I was a kid, I was going to this high school that was a real small high school, involved with drugs and just kind of, I guess, what you call a gang at that time, and just this whole kind of seedy underworld type situation. And so at this small school was a coach, track coach, and baseball coach, all the different things. And so he overheard me kind of bragging about how when parties were getting busted, or we were doing some crazy things in the parking lot, all these different things, the cops would come, and I was bragging about how I could outrun them and jump the fences and hide, and they could they could never catch me. And it was definitely a dark time. I was 16, hadn't found the Lord yet. And so he heard enough about that. instead of judging, instead of just saying, "Oh, look at that drug addict," or he's not gonna ever be a good, good at sports or a good athlete, he started hounding me about, "Hey man, you're good at running from the cops. You'd be good at track." And I said, I don't do sports. But he just kept speaking into my life and kept encouraging me. So finally I broke down. Next thing I knew, I was running long distance track, doing the practices. And it really was a game changer for me. I had never had a coach or even a kind of someone to look up to or a leader pick me out and go after me. And I was definitely that dirty penny at that time. I was definitely that penny in the middle of the street. I'm sure he got flack from other teachers, even other people on the track team, like, "What are you doing putting this kid on there?" But that encouragement really allowed me to do well, and I placed, second or third on a lot of the meets. But at the end of it, it wasn't even about the meets, but it was the discipline and realizing that someone really cared. Someone wanted to speak into my life. And so these moments that we have in our life really are times that we can show God's love to people. And a lot of people that know me, they say, "Well, I go out and I talk to everybody, and that's just who I am." But the thing is that's not necessarily my personality. It's because I've experienced God's love. I've been in a hopeless place before, and then throughout seasons in that place. And I really just want people to see the truth of who Christ is. I want people to feel His presence in maybe the dark places they are in. Another great story that I wanted to share was our church meets in downtown Alpharetta. There's a lot of stuff going on down there, a lot of restaurants. So there's kind of a park that has a big fountain, and this was probably 6-8 months ago maybe. And so I was kind of cutting across to go get lunch, and there was a guy sitting at the bench just kind of looking at the fountain. And the Lord was speaking to me, and He said, "Hey, go talk to that person." I said, "No, God." I said, "I'm hungry. I just don't feel like doing it." And so he just kind of reminded me that he said, "Hey, I felt like dealing with you, so pass that on." And so I went over and just started talking to the guy. I said, "Hey, I'm pastor of a church that meets close by." And he said, "I took the day off from work because I was crying out to the Lord. I said, 'Lord, I don't know who you are. I'm trying to hear you. Please just send a sign that you care about me.'" And so literally, if I had walked on, if I had neglected picking up that penny, that opportunity, I wouldn't have got to experience this amazing supernatural event where I got to pray for this guy, and I got to kind of stand in the gap and be that light, that reminder that Jesus really cared about him. And so I think what's amazing about these opportunities is a lot of times it's a fight, right? It's a fight with our flesh to walk these out. But at the end of it, just the encouragement, the blessing, the excitement of seeing God move is really, really, really worth it. So let me read Luke 10:30 through 37. In reply, so Jesus is replying to what the Pharisees were talking about, trying to once again trip him up, and kind of the definition of a neighbor. "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side." So of course, at this point, depending on what you read about the backstory, he might not have known that this man was still alive. And so there were definitely certain things, that Leviticus talks about in the Old Testament, and just certain rules that the priest had to adhere to You know, and if he had touched their body, he would have had to gone through a purification process. And how does that relate today? Well, yeah, there's some people that we just don't necessarily want to deal with. If you kind of are real with yourself, there might be cultures that we're not used to. There might be, you know, even people that might, in our mind, might not appear to be loved by God. And so a lot of times in our life, we're like this priest. I think when I read this after I got saved and, you know, growing up in the church, I was like real judgmental of that priest. I was like, man, that's just not right. But then God reminded me of there were times in my life when I walked by, maybe that homeless person, or maybe that person that didn't look like me, or maybe that person I didn't relate to, you know, maybe that businessman that I was like, God, I don't have anything in common with that person. Or with the homeless person, hey, I don't even have any money to give them, and yet the disciples said, I don't have anything to give to you, but what I can do is say, pick up your mat and follow me. So I think this whole concept of one, I don't relate to that person. Two, I don't have anything to give to this person, really keeps us from picking up those pennies. And what's amazing is we have the love of Christ to pass on. We have the miracles that God does to pass on. And so part of that stepping out is allowing God to show you how he moves outside the box, how he moves outside the church, how he moves outside our comfort zone. So moving on. So too, Levi, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was. And when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. So the Samaritans had a different place of worship. They were kind of the bottom tier. The Jewish culture really did not like them. They were kind of ridiculed, even the scapegoat in certain areas. And whether this Samaritan knew that this person was Jewish or not, there were definitely, when you read kind of historical documents, there were definitely things that kind of made Jewish people stand out as far as their clothing, the way they dressed, and, you know, different things like that. So most people believe that he kind of knew that this person was Jewish, and yet he picked him up and he bandaged his wounds. He didn't pick him up and pass him off on someone else and say, oh, okay, well, here, I'll send you, in our case, talk to someone and say, hey, I'll send you to someone who is good at teaching scriptures, or I'll send someone to you, you know, here's a number, call this person and he'll encourage you. He did this, and he was not a doctor, so he kind of had to step out of his comfort zone and bandage this person up. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you have. So this is definitely a parable that Jesus was kind of reciting. And so the reality is we have different learning styles. And so Jesus, because he's part of the Trinity, he was part of the creation process on how we as humans function, how we think. He used parables, he used different connection points as he was teaching. And so in this parable, there were definitely things that people related to and could understand. And so the Samaritan literally put him on his own donkey. And you know, donkeys are a smaller animal, and so they're not like horses where you can jump on them and put someone else on them. He probably had to walk. He definitely had to do that sacrifice. And then not only that, he sacrificed his funds and left him with the innkeeper. He even said, I'll follow up. I'll come back and reimburse you. So I think as these different times in our life, these pennies that are on the ground, on the pavement, that God says, hey, go pick up this opportunity. I think it's a great opportunity to follow up with people. Man, I have made so many awesome friends just by seeing those pennies on the pavement, seeing those opportunities. One time I was at this Indian restaurant, and it's South Indian, and so most Indian restaurants we go to are Northern Indian food, and so they're kind of what as Americans we kind of understand, and then what we know as Indian food. So I went there and I realized, oh my gosh, I don't know any of this. I don't know how to order. And then of course, pretty much it was definitely the place to go if you're Indian. So I mean, everyone was Indian, really except for me. There's some language barriers. And so I could have just walked out of that place. I could have just kind of kept to myself and just guessed. But for some reason, and two, just kind of who I am, I turned around and asked this guy, I said, hey, I have no idea what to order. And so he and Don, Malik and Don actually told me, okay, well, here's what you order. Let me help you out. This is what's good. And so, you know, then kind of the next step is I could have eaten by myself, but I said, hey, here's an opportunity to see God move. And so I sat down with them. Thank God, because they actually called out the order in Hindi, so I would have had no idea. And then this relationship with both of them started, and you know, it's really awesome. Malik's really a great friend, and then Don, a great friend too, and just even seeing them move in those opportunities of picking up pennies. So I really wanted to encourage whoever's listening to move past their comfort zone. You know, to move past the busyness of life. And even in this season, we have the challenges of the virus and a lot of that fear. But even saying, God, how can I move in these ways and love on people? And it takes a heart. It takes a kind of a shift of the way you think. As you're walking, start to listen. Start to ask God, what are you doing? I think a lot of times if you're really gifted at praying or healing, in the church setting, a lot of times people do that and say, God, what are you doing during ministry time? But the reality is every minute, every day could be ministry time. And so as you're walking, just kind of be aware of what's going on around you. Ask God to kind of light up those that need encouragement, those that need hope. And then the next step is following through, right? When God tells you to do it, fight that flesh, fight all those things, all those excuses that we have that the enemy throws at you, and walk it out. And then kind of reap the harvests of seeing God move in this way. And what I found, what's amazing about doing mission work, about walking this out, is all the time, the person doing these things is as encouraged as the person receiving hope. And then, of course, don't just stop there. Use it as an opportunity to get to know the person. I think the challenge a lot of times is we want to kind of drop that bomb, go in and pray for someone, and then we just, hey, you know, here you go, and then we just run off. But I think when you see the different examples that Jesus did and that the disciples did, they kind of called out these people and reminded them of who they are. And so, like I said, it's a great opportunity to really make new friends, see God move in amazing ways. So once again, I think constantly listening, constantly looking and saying, God, what are you doing in this situation? And of course, we all have our issues. We all have bad days, but kind of creating that kind of that idea when you wake up. This is how I'm going to kind of recalibrate myself, and then listening to the Lord when that opportunity comes up, fighting the flesh, walking out that opportunity, and then following up with His people. So I hope this really encouraged you. You know, I think 36, just to kind of close, Jesus says, which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? And the expert in the law, the person that originally asked Jesus, who is your neighbor? The one who had mercy on him is what he said. And Jesus told him, go and do likewise. And so I think we think our neighbors are people who live next door, but the reality, our neighbors are whoever we come in contact with. I think too, in this time of division, our neighbors might be Republicans if you're Democrat, or if you're Republicans, they might be Democrat. Or vice versa. They might be people that we don't relate to. If you're an artist, they might be someone who is into sports. Or if you're a businessman, they might be the artist. Might be someone outside of your culture that you haven't had experience with just connecting with. And so I just hope this really helps kind of reboot and calibrate the way you see each day, the way you see the opportunities that lay before us, that are beyond just doing mission work, beyond just going to outreaches. And then as you learn to walk into this, train up people to walk into this too. You know, your kids, friends, be that crazy person. Be that person that walks up and talks to people, even when maybe your friends kind of slump back. But I think as you walk that out and grow in that, people see the fruit from it. People see the excitement of God moving, because God is a living God. He is a God that wants to stick his finger in the ripple of and make ripples in the pond that we live. And that excitement of seeing him move is really what fuels and really fights against that apathy that we as Christians have. So let me pray for whoever's listening, for you guys, and then we'll close. So Lord, I thank you for those that have tuned in. Lord, I know that this is a divine appointment, Lord. I know that whoever's listening, you've kind of put on their heart to move in new ways, Lord. So I pray you break down any walls that people might have in moving in this. Lord, I pray that you allow them to just see the baby steps, Lord, even just trying to relate to people and those baby steps. And then, Lord, I pray you just raise them up to move in mighty ways, Lord. And I thank you that you are breaking off the apathy that a lot of the church has, Lord. And even in this season of not being able to do a lot of things as Christians we're used to, Lord, I know you didn't cause us, but I know you're moving. Lord, so I pray that you move in new ways. And whoever's listening, bless them and protect them. In Jesus' name, amen. So once again, this is Caffeine for the Soul. My name's Ryan Johnson. I'm the co-pastor of Living Water Vineyard Church. It's every Wednesday at 10 o'clock, Facebook Live. Have a great day.